Sometimes the most powerful conversations happen in the quietest places. When Marcus Thompson, a successful tech CEO and single father, decided to escape the chaos of city life for a weekend retreat in the mountains, he never expected to encounter Sarah Mitchell, a mysterious woman seeking her own refuge from a crumbling marriage. What began as polite cabin neighbors sharing morning coffee on adjacent porches would transform into a raw, honest dialogue about race, privilege, love, and second chances. But it was Sarah's whispered confession on their final evening together that would shatter both their carefully constructed walls and force them to confront truths they'd spent years avoiding. This is their story, unfiltered, authentic, and surprisingly hopeful. Marcus Thompson gripped the steering wheel tighter as his Tesla wound through the mountain roads leading to Pine Ridge Caverns. The familiar weight of exhaustion pressed against his shoulders, a burden he'd carried for months. At 38, he had built Thompson Tech Solutions from a garage startup into a company valued at over $50 million. Yet today, success felt more like a prison than an achievement. The phone calls had started at 5 that morning. First, his assistant reminding him about the board meeting he was deliberately missing. Then his mother checking on 8-year-old Zoe, who was spending the weekend with her grandmother. Finally, his ex-wife Denise, her voice sharp with the familiar edge of disappointment. "You can't just disappear, Marcus. What if something happens to Zoe? What if there's an emergency at the company?" He had ended the call without answering. For once, he needed to be unreachable. The cabin came into view as he rounded the final bend. It was exactly as advertised, rustic but comfortable, nestled between towering pines with a view of the valley below. More importantly, it was 3 hours away from Atlanta, from boardrooms, from the constant demands of being the face of success that everyone expected him to be. Marcus had chosen this particular retreat because the cabins were spaced far apart, each offering privacy and solitude. He wasn't looking for connection or conversation. He wanted silence. He wanted to remember who he was before the company, before the divorce, before the weight of being a role model for every young black entrepreneur who looked to him for inspiration. As he unloaded his single bag from the trunk, he noticed movement at the cabin next door. A woman with shoulder-length brown hair was struggling to carry a large suitcase up the wooden steps to her porch. She wore jeans and a simple white sweater, and even from a distance he could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful way she moved as if she were holding herself together through sheer will. Their eyes met briefly across the 20 feet that separated their cabins. She offered a polite nod before disappearing inside. Marcus felt a flicker of curiosity but pushed it aside. He was here to be alone. The interior of his cabin was exactly what he needed, simple, clean, with large windows that framed the mountain view. He set his bag on the bedroom dresser and stood for a moment in the unusual quiet. No phones ringing, no employees needing decisions. No 8-year-old asking for help with homework or wanting to show him the latest video game trick. He loved Zoe more than life itself, but being a single father while running a demanding company had left him feeling stretched thin, like butter scraped over too much bread. Every decision felt monumental. Every choice carried the weight of providing for their future while being present for her childhood. Marcus opened a bottle of wine he'd brought from the city and settled onto the cabin's back deck. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and something else, wood smoke from a neighboring fireplace. As darkness fell, he could see a warm glow from the windows of the cabin next door. He thought about the woman he'd briefly seen. There had been something in her posture, a familiar weariness that he recognized. But then, maybe he was just projecting his own exhaustion onto a stranger. The first night passed peacefully. Marcus slept later than he had in months, waking to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment he couldn't remember where he was, and the disorientation was actually pleasant. No immediate responsibilities, no schedule demanding his attention. He made coffee in the small kitchen and carried his mug to the front porch. The morning was beautiful, with mist rising from the valley below. That's when he saw her again, the woman from the neighboring cabin. She was sitting on her own porch, wrapped in a thick robe, holding her own steaming mug. This time she looked directly at him and offered a genuine smile. "Beautiful morning," she called softly. "It really is," Marcus replied. Something about her voice made him pause. There was a gentleness there, but also a strength that intrigued him despite his intention to remain antisocial. "I'm Sarah," she said, raising her mug in a small salute. "Marcus." He found himself walking to the edge of his porch, closer to where she sat. "First time here?" Sarah asked. "Yeah? You?" "Third, actually. I come here when I need to think." She was quiet for a moment, studying her coffee. "When life gets too complicated. There was something in the way she said it that made Marcus suspect she understood exactly why he was here. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, two strangers sharing the morning quiet. "Do you mind if I ask what you do?" Sarah eventually said. "You don't have to answer. I'm just curious about what brings people to places like this." Marcus hesitated. Usually, when people learned he was a CEO, the dynamic changed. Suddenly, he was the successful businessman, the inspiration, the guy who had it all figured out. But something about Sarah's demeanor suggested she might see him differently. "I run a tech company," he said simply. "And I'm a dad. What about you?" "I teach high school English," Sarah replied. "And I'm trying to figure out if I want to stay married." The honesty of her response caught Marcus off guard. People didn't usually share that kind of information with strangers, especially not within minutes of meeting them. "That's a big decision," he said carefully. Sarah nodded. 22 years of marriage, 2 kids in college, a husband who's a good man, but... She trailed off, shaking her head. "Sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you this. There's something about this place that makes me want to be honest." Marcus understood exactly what she meant. The isolation, the distance from their regular lives, created a strange kind of freedom. "For what it's worth," he said, "I went through a divorce 3 years ago. It's hard, but sometimes necessary. Was it the right decision? For my daughter and me, yes. For my ex-wife too, though she might not admit it." Marcus surprised himself with his openness. "We were making each other miserable, trying to be people we weren't." Sarah studied him with intelligent gray eyes. "You seem very sure of yourself."
"I'm sure of very little, actually," Marcus admitted.
"That's part of why I'm here." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. Sarah spoke about her students, her love of literature, her sense that she had lost herself somewhere, in the middle of a life that looked perfect on paper but felt empty. Marcus found himself sharing things he rarely discussed. The pressure of being one of the few black CEOs in his industry. The challenge of raising a daughter while building a company. The loneliness that success had brought. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said as they finally prepared to go back inside. "I was dreading having a neighbor this weekend. I wanted to be completely alone." "Same here," Marcus said, "but this is nice. Talking to someone who doesn't want anything from me." "What do you mean?" Marcus paused, considering how to explain. "In my regular life, everyone wants something. Business deals, advice, money, access, inspiration. Even well-meaning people see me as a symbol rather than just a person. It's exhausting." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I think I understand. Different pressures, but I get it. Being a white woman married to a successful attorney in our community, there are certain expectations. Charity work, social events, being the perfect supportive wife. Sometimes I feel like I'm performing my own life." The sun was higher now, burning off the morning mist. Both of them seemed to realize they had shared more than intended. "Would you like to have dinner tonight?" Sarah asked suddenly. "I mean, just as neighbors. I brought too much food, and eating alone gets depressing." Marcus considered the invitation. His first instinct was to decline, to protect his solitude. But something about Sarah made him want to continue their conversation. "I'd like that," he said. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself, and maybe some of that wine I saw you carrying in yesterday." As they went back to their respective cabins, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. Not for a business meeting or a parenting obligation, but for simple human connection with someone who seemed to see him as just Marcus. Not Marcus the CEO, or Marcus the inspiration, or Marcus the single black father who had it all figured out. He spent the day hiking the trails around the cabins, letting his mind wander for the first time in recent memory. When was the last time he had taken a walk without checking his phone? When had he last sat quietly without feeling guilty about all the things he should be doing instead? By evening, he was actually excited about dinner with Sarah. He knocked on her cabin door at 7, wine in hand, curious about what the night might bring. Sarah answered wearing a simple black dress and a warm smile. "Perfect timing. I hope you like pasta." "Love it," Marcus said, stepping inside. Her cabin was identical to his but felt completely different. Books were scattered on every surface, and soft jazz played from a small speaker. A fire crackled in the fireplace. "This is nice," he said, looking around. "Very comfortable." "Books make any place feel like home," Sarah replied, leading him to the small dining area where she had set a simple table with candles and wildflowers from outside. Over dinner, their conversation deepened. Sarah talked about her marriage to David, a man she had loved since college but no longer felt connected to. Marcus shared his struggles with building a company while trying to be present for Zoe, the constant guilt of feeling like he was failing at both. "Do you mind if I ask about Zoe's mother?" Sarah said gently. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Denise is a good mother, but we were wrong for each other from the beginning. We met in business school, both ambitious, both driven. We thought that was enough." He took a sip of wine. "Turns out, sharing ambition isn't the same as sharing values or vision." "What do you mean?" "Denise saw my success as validation of her choices. She loved being married to the successful CEO, but she never really saw me as just Marcus. And honestly, I probably did the same thing to her." He paused. "When you're both performing your lives instead of living them, eventually something breaks." Sarah nodded. "That's exactly what I'm afraid is happening to me and David. We're very good at being married on paper. Great house, successful careers, kids doing well in school. But when we're alone together, we're basically strangers who share a mortgage." The conversation continued late into the evening. They talked about race, about privilege, about the different pressures they faced and the similarities in their experiences of feeling trapped by success. Marcus found Sarah's perspective refreshing. She didn't treat him like a spokesperson for his entire race, but she also didn't pretend that race didn't matter. She asked thoughtful questions and listened to his answers without judgment. "Can I tell you something that might sound terrible?" Sarah said as they finished the bottle of wine. "Of course. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had made different choices. If I had been braver when I was younger." She looked into the fire. "I went to graduate school for creative writing. I wanted to be a novelist. But David offered stability, a clear path, and I was scared to bet on myself." "It's not too late," Marcus said. "You're what, 45? You could still write." 44, Sarah corrected with a smile. "And maybe you're right. But it feels too late to completely change directions. I started my company when Zoe was 5, Marcus told her. Everyone said it was crazy timing. New father, limited savings, competing against established players. But sometimes the wrong time is actually the right time because you have nothing to lose." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down. Marcus realized he felt more relaxed than he had in months. There was something about Sarah's presence that allowed him to just be himself without the weight of expectations or responsibilities. "Thank you for this," he said finally. "For dinner, for the conversation. I came here to be alone, but I'm glad I wasn't."
Me too, Sarah replied.
It's nice to talk to someone who understands what it feels like to be successful, but not necessarily happy. As Marcus walked back to his cabin under a canopy of stars, he found himself thinking about Sarah's last comment. She was right. Success hadn't brought him happiness, just different problems. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, he had felt genuinely content. He fell asleep easily, lulled by the mountain quiet and the memory of intelligent grey eyes and genuine laughter. Tomorrow was another day of unexpected possibility. Marcus woke the next morning to the sound of rain pattering against his cabin windows. The steady rhythm was soothing, creating a cocoon of intimacy that made the outside world feel even more distant. He made coffee and settled into the chair by his window, watching droplets race down the glass. Through the rain, he could see Sarah moving around her cabin, occasionally passing by the windows. There was something graceful about her movements, deliberate and thoughtful. He wondered what she was thinking about, whether she was feeling the same sense of suspended reality that had settled over him since arriving here. Around 10, there was a soft knock at his door. Sarah stood on his porch holding 2 steaming mugs and wearing a rain jacket with the hood pulled up. "Peace offering," she said with a smile. "I made too much coffee, and I was wondering if you'd like to sit and watch the rain." There's something magical about mountain storms. Marcus invited her in, and they settled on his couch facing the large window that overlooked the valley. The storm had brought low clouds that obscured the distant peaks, creating an intimate atmosphere where the world seemed to consist of just their 2 cabins and the surrounding forest. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," Sarah began, curling her legs under her on the couch. "About it never being too late to make changes. Do you really believe that?" Marcus considered her question carefully. "I think we tell ourselves it's too late because change is scary. But look at you. You're sitting in a cabin in the mountains questioning your entire life. That's already a kind of change, isn't it?" "I suppose you're right." Sarah gazed out at the rain. "David doesn't even know where I am this weekend. I told him I was visiting my sister in Charlotte. That's the first time I've ever lied to him about something significant." "How does that feel?" "Liberating. And terrible. Both at the same time." She turned to face Marcus. Can I ask you something personal? When you knew your marriage was over, what was the moment that made you certain? Marcus thought back to that difficult period 3 years ago. It wasn't one moment, exactly. It was more like a series of realizations that we were living parallel lives instead of a shared one. But if I had to pick a specific moment... He paused, remembering. Zoe had a school play. She was so excited, had been practicing her lines for weeks. Denise missed it because of a work conference she could have rescheduled. I was there, recording everything, so proud of our daughter. And I realized that I was always going to be the one who showed up, and Denise was always going to have something more important. That must have been painful. It was, but it was also clarifying. I understood that our priorities were fundamentally different, and no amount of effort was going to change that. Marcus studied Sarah's face. What about you? Is there a moment when you knew something was wrong? Sarah was quiet for a long time, watching the rain streak down the windows. About 6 months ago, David got a promotion. Partner at his law firm, something he'd been working toward for years. We went to this celebration dinner with all his colleagues and their wives. Everyone was congratulating us, talking about how proud I must be. What an accomplishment this was for our family. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. I sat there smiling and saying all the right things, but inside I felt completely empty. This was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of our marriage, and all I could think about was how I felt like a supporting character in my own life. David's success, David's celebration, David's dream coming true. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked about my dreams. Marcus nodded, understanding the feeling all too well. Success can be isolating when you're the only one responsible for it, but it sounds like you feel isolated even within your marriage. Exactly. Sarah's voice grew stronger, more certain. With David, I'm always the wife, the supportive partner, the woman behind the successful man. Even our friends see me that way. But here, talking to you, I feel like myself. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Marcus replied. That's part of what made my divorce necessary. Denise needed me to be the successful husband who validated her choices. But I needed to be just Marcus sometimes, not the CEO or the provider or the symbol of achievement. They spent the morning talking about identity, about the masks they wore in their regular lives, about the difference between being successful and being fulfilled. The rain provided a natural rhythm to their conversation, creating pauses for reflection and thought.
Can I tell you something that might surprise you? Sarah said during one of these quiet moments.
Of course! Before I met you, I had very specific ideas about successful black men in business. Not necessarily negative, but limited. I thought you would all be very serious, very focused on proving yourselves, maybe a little guarded. She looked embarrassed. I'm realizing how narrow my perspective was. Marcus appreciated her honesty. What changed your mind? You're so present when you listen, and vulnerable in a way I wasn't expecting. Most successful people I know, including my husband, seem to have this armor they wear all the time. But you let me see your uncertainty, your struggles. It's refreshing. I've learned that the armor gets heavy after a while, Marcus said, and it doesn't actually protect you from the things that really matter. My daughter sees right through it anyway. Kids always do. Tell me about Zoe. What's she like? Marcus's entire demeanor changed when he talked about his daughter. His voice became warmer, his eyes brighter. She's 8 and she's absolutely fearless. Last month she announced that she wants to be a marine biologist and a chef because she wants to cook the fish she studies. He laughed. She has this way of seeing possibilities where adults see problems. She sounds wonderful. Does she look like you? She has my eyes and her mother's smile, but her personality is all her own. She's confident in a way that I wasn't at her age. Maybe because she's growing up seeing that it's possible for people who look like us to achieve things. Marcus's expression grew more serious. I worry about her sometimes, about the world she's going to navigate as a black woman, but then I see her tackle something new without hesitation, and I think maybe she'll be stronger than I am. Sarah listened intently. It must be both inspiring and terrifying to raise a daughter with so much potential in a world that might not always recognize it. That's exactly it. I want to prepare her for reality without crushing her spirit. It's a delicate balance. I think about that with my students sometimes. I teach at a school that's about 60% black and Hispanic, and I see these incredibly bright, talented kids who don't always believe in their own potential. I try to be the teacher who sees them, really sees them, but I know I can't undo all the messages they get from society. This led to a deeper conversation about education, opportunity, and the subtle and not-so-subtle ways that race influenced their daily experiences. Marcus found Sarah's perspective thoughtful and informed. clearly shaped by her work with diverse students rather than abstract theories. You know what's interesting? Marcus said. In business, I'm often the only black person in the room. People either expect me to speak for all black people, or they're so careful not to mention race that it becomes this awkward elephant. You're the first white person I've talked to in a long time who can discuss race naturally without making it weird. Thank you for saying that. I've been thinking a lot about privilege lately, especially after David's promotion. How many opportunities come our way simply because of how we look, who we know, what people assume about us. It's uncomfortable to acknowledge, but important. The rain began to lighten as afternoon approached. They made lunch together in Marcus's kitchen, working easily around each other, as if they had been cooking together for years. The simple domesticity of it felt natural and comfortable. This is nice, Sarah said, as they ate sandwiches at his small table. Just normal conversation, normal interaction. No agenda, no performance. It's what I miss most about being married to the right person, Marcus agreed. The everyday moments that don't have to mean anything except what they are. Do you think you'll marry again? Maybe, if I meet someone who sees me as a whole person rather than a successful catch. What about you? Are you going to leave David? Sarah set down her sandwich and considered the question seriously. I think I am. Maybe not immediately, but yes. This weekend has clarified something for me. I can't keep pretending to be satisfied with a marriage that feels more like a business partnership. What will you do? Practically, I mean. I have some money saved and I could support myself on my teacher's salary if I had to. It wouldn't be the lifestyle I'm used to, but it would be mine. She looked out the window at the clearing sky. Maybe I'll finally try to write that novel. I'd like to read it someday. Would you really? Absolutely. I have a feeling you have important stories to tell. The afternoon passed quickly. They took a walk when the rain stopped, exploring the trails around the cabins and talking about books, travel, dreams they had postponed. Marcus found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't in months. Sarah's company was easy and stimulating, challenging him to think about things from new angles, while accepting him exactly as he was. As evening approached, they found themselves back on Sarah's porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Can I confess something? Sarah said softly. Always. I'm attracted to you, not just physically, although that's part of it. I'm attracted to your mind, your perspective, the way you listen, and I know that's complicated given our situations. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. He had been feeling the same pull towards Sarah, but hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge it fully. It's very mutual, he said quietly. And you're right, it's complicated. I don't want to do anything that would hurt your relationship with your daughter or complicate your life, but I also don't want to pretend I'm not feeling something real here. Marcus turned to look at her fully. In the golden light of sunset, she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional attractiveness and everything to do with the honesty and intelligence that animated her features. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking that I've spent so many years being careful, being appropriate, doing what was expected. And maybe, just for this weekend, I want to be honest about what I want instead of what I should want. They sat in charged silence, both understanding that they were at a crossroads. Whatever they decided in the next few moments would change the dynamic between them permanently. I don't want you to do anything you'll regret, Marcus said finally, but I also don't want to waste this connection by overthinking it. Sarah reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. Her touch was warm and certain. I won't regret being honest about my feelings, she said. Whatever else happens, I won't regret that. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. Then maybe we should stop talking and see where this goes. They moved inside together, the evening air suddenly feeling too cool for the warmth building between them. In the soft light of Sarah's cabin, surrounded by her books and the lingering scent of the morning's coffee, they kissed for the first time. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of them aware of the significance of the moment. But as they relaxed into each other's presence, the kiss deepened, expressing all the connection and attraction they had been building over the past day and a half. When they finally broke apart, Sarah rested her forehead against Marcus's, both of them breathing slightly harder. That was, she began. Perfect, Marcus finished. They spent the evening talking and touching, exploring the physical chemistry that had been building alongside their emotional connection. But it was the conversation that felt most intimate, sharing fears, dreams, and vulnerabilities in the safety of their temporary world. As night fell completely, they lay together on Sarah's couch, her head on his chest, listening to the night sounds of the mountain forest. What happens when we go back to our real lives? Sarah asked quietly. I don't know, Marcus admitted, but I know this matters. What we've shared here, it's real, and that has value regardless of what comes next. I'm scared, Sarah confessed. Scared of going back to feeling numb. Scared of losing this feeling of being fully alive. Marcus stroked her hair gently. Then don't go back to feeling numb. Take this with you. Let it remind you of who you really are. They fell asleep on the couch together, wrapped in the mountain quiet and the warmth of unexpected connection. Tomorrow was their last day, but tonight felt infinite and perfect. Marcus woke before dawn, still on Sarah's couch with her warm body pressed against his side. For a moment, he lay perfectly still, not wanting to disturb the peaceful intimacy of the moment. Through the cabin windows, he could see the first hints of sunrise painting the sky pale pink. Sarah stirred beside him, opening her eyes slowly. When she saw him watching her, a soft smile spread across her face. Good morning, she whispered. Good morning. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months. She stretched slightly, then settled back against him. I was worried I might feel awkward this morning, but I don't. Do you? Marcus considered this. Last night had been unexpected and wonderful, but he had wondered if daylight might bring regret or complications. Instead, he felt a deep sense of rightness about their connection. Not at all, he said honestly. If anything, I feel more clear than I have in a long time. They made coffee together in the pre-dawn quiet, moving around each other with an easy intimacy that felt both new and familiar. Outside, the mountain world was waking up, birds beginning their morning songs and the forest coming alive with subtle sounds.
It's our last day, Sarah observed as they settled on the porch with their coffee.
The sunrise was spectacular, painting the entire valley in shades of gold and rose. I know. Part of me wants to stay here forever, but part of me is ready to go back and make some changes. What kind of changes? Marcus thought about this carefully. I think I need to find better balance. I've been so focused on building the company and providing for Zoe that I forgot about taking care of myself, about staying connected to who I am beyond my roles and responsibilities. What would that look like practically? Maybe hiring a COO so I can step back from day-to-day operations. Spending more quality time with Zoe instead of just managing her schedule. Dating again, eventually, when I meet someone who sees me the way you do. He looked at Sarah. What about you? Sarah was quiet for several minutes, watching the sunrise. I think I'm going to ask David for a separation when I get home. Not necessarily a divorce immediately, but space to figure out who I am when I'm not being his wife. That's a big step. It is. But this weekend has shown me that I can't keep living a half-life. I deserve to feel the way I felt here with you, fully present, fully myself, fully alive. How do you think he'll react? I honestly don't know. Part of me thinks he might be relieved. We've both been going through the motions for so long that maybe he's as unhappy as I am but doesn't know how to address it. Sarah turned to face Marcus. Can I ask you something that might sound crazy? Always. Do you believe in fate? In the idea that some meetings are meant to happen? Marcus smiled. I believe in being open to unexpected possibilities. A week ago, if someone had told me I'd meet an incredible woman in a mountain cabin and have the most honest conversations of my life, I would have said they were crazy. But here we are. Here we are, Sarah agreed, and I'm so grateful for it, even though it's complicated. They spent the morning hiking together, taking a longer trail that led to a waterfall about 2 miles from the cabins. The physical activity felt good, working out some of the nervous energy that came with knowing their time together was limited. Tell me about your business, Sarah said as they walked. What made you want to start a tech company? I was working for a consulting firm right after business school, and I kept seeing small businesses struggling with technology solutions that were either too expensive or too complicated. I thought there had to be a better way to help them modernize without breaking their budgets. And there was. Turned out there was. We developed a platform that could scale with businesses as they grew, starting simple and adding features as they needed them. The timing was right, and we got some breaks along the way. Some breaks and a lot of hard work, I'm guessing. Marcus laughed. Definitely a lot of hard work. The first 2 years I was working 18-hour days trying to code, manage clients and handle business development all at once. Zoe was little and Denise was carrying most of the parenting load, which created its own tensions. Do you miss it? The early days when everything was uncertain but full of possibility? Sometimes. There's something energizing about building something from nothing. But I also appreciate the stability now, knowing that Zoe's college fund is secure and that the business can run without me being involved in every decision. They reached the waterfall, a beautiful cascade that fell about 30 feet into a clear pool surrounded by large rocks. The sound of falling water created a natural white noise that made the space feel even more private and separate from the outside world. "This is incredible," Sarah said, settling on one of the sun-warmed rocks. "I could stay here all day." Marcus sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "It's beautiful, but I have to admit, the view I'm enjoying most has nothing to do with the waterfall." Sarah blushed, something Marcus found endearing given their growing intimacy. "You're very good at making me feel attractive and interesting," she said. "I haven't felt that way in a long time. You are attractive and interesting. The fact that your husband doesn't see that says nothing about you and everything about him. Can I tell you something about my marriage that I've never told anyone?" "Of course." Sarah picked up a small stone and turned it over in her hands, seeming to gather courage. "David and I haven't been truly intimate in over 2 years. Not just sex, although that stopped too, but real emotional connection. We sleep in the same bed and share the same house, but we're living completely separate lives." She looked up at Marcus. "Last night was the first time in years that I felt desired, seen, appreciated as a woman, rather than just as a wife or a teacher or a mother." Marcus felt a surge of tenderness for her, mixed with anger at her husband for taking such a remarkable woman for granted. "I'm sorry you've been feeling invisible, and I'm honored that you trusted me to see you. It's more than that, though. With you, I feel like myself again. The version of myself I was before I started molding my personality to fit David's expectations and society's expectations of what a partner should be." "What was that version like?"
Bolder.
"More curious, willing to take risks." Sarah smiled, remembering. "I used to travel by myself, take photography classes, write terrible poetry that I thought was brilliant. I had opinions about everything and wasn't afraid to share them. I was messier, more passionate, more alive." "You're still that person. She's been there all along, just waiting for permission to come out again." "Is that what you think?" "I know it. I've seen her this weekend. She's wonderful." They sat by the waterfall for over an hour, talking about their pasts, their dreams, the people they had been before life convinced them to be more careful, more practical, more acceptable to others. "Marcus," Sarah said eventually, "can I share something with you that I've never told another living soul?" The seriousness in her tone made Marcus give her his complete attention. "When I was in graduate school studying creative writing, I had a brief affair with one of my professors. He was married, I was engaged to David, and it was completely wrong on every level." Marcus waited, sensing there was more to the story. "But for those few months, I felt more like myself than I had before or since. Not because of the secrecy or the forbidden nature of it, but because he saw me as an intellectual equal, as someone with important things to say. He challenged my thinking, encouraged my writing, made me feel brilliant and capable and worthy of respect." "What happened?" "His wife found out. There was a huge scandal, he lost his job, his marriage ended, and I was left feeling like I had destroyed his life for a few moments of feeling understood." Sarah's voice grew quiet. "I married David 6 months later, determined never to be that selfish again. I convinced myself that feeling intellectually and emotionally connected to someone wasn't worth the potential for causing that kind of damage." Marcus absorbed this, understanding now some of the caution and guilt he had sensed in Sarah. "Do you think that's why you've been living a half-life? Because you're afraid of the power of your own desires?" "Maybe. Probably." Sarah looked at him directly. "But this weekend, with you, I'm remembering that connection and passion don't have to be destructive. They can be healing too." "What we have is different," Marcus said firmly. "You're not the same person you were 20 years ago, and neither am I. We're both free to make choices about what we want, and we're both honest about our situations." "You really think this is different?" "I know it is. What happened with your professor was about escaping your life. What's happening between us is about embracing who you really are. There's a huge difference." They began the hike back to the cabins, both lost in thought. The day was warm and beautiful, but Marcus could feel the weight of their approaching departure. Tomorrow morning they would return to their separate lives, and this magical suspension of reality would end. "Can I ask you something difficult?" Sarah said as they reached the familiar trail leading back to the cabins. "Always." "Do you think there's any way for us to stay in touch? To maintain some kind of connection when we go back to our regular lives?" Marcus had been wondering the same thing. The thought of losing touch with Sarah felt almost unbearable, but he also understood the complications. "I'd like that more than anything. But I want to be realistic about what that would look like. You're going through a separation. I'm a single father with a demanding business. Neither of us needs the added complexity of trying to maintain a long-distance relationship. I know, but maybe we could be friends? Support each other through the changes we're both making. I'd love that. As long as we're both honest about what we're feeling and what we can handle. They spent the rest of the afternoon back at the cabins, sometimes together and sometimes apart, both processing the intensity of the weekend and preparing emotionally for their return to regular life. As evening approached, they cooked dinner together one last time. A simple pasta dish that they ate on Sarah's porch while watching another spectacular mountain sunset. Thank you, Sarah said suddenly as they finished eating. For what? For seeing me. For helping me remember who I am. For showing me that it's possible to feel truly connected to another person. Thank you for the same. And for being brave enough to be vulnerable with a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore. No, Marcus agreed. You're not either. They spent the evening talking about practical things. When they would leave the next morning, how they might stay in touch, what they would tell people about their weekend. But underneath the practical conversation was an emotional current, both of them aware that something significant was ending. Sarah, Marcus said as the night deepened, I want you to know that whatever happens next, this weekend has been one of the most important experiences of my life. You've helped me remember what it feels like to be truly seen and appreciated. That's a gift I'll carry with me always. For me too. You've given me courage to make the changes I need to make, and you've shown me that real connection is possible, which gives me hope for the future. They went to bed together that night, making love with a tenderness and intensity that felt like both a celebration and a goodbye. Afterward, they lay awake talking until nearly dawn, reluctant to waste a moment of their remaining time together. I'm scared about tomorrow, Sarah admitted, as the first light began to show through the windows. Me too, but I'm also excited about what comes next. For both of us. Promise me something? What? Promise me that you'll remember how it feels to be this version of yourself. Don't let the demands of your regular life make you forget. I promise. You promise me the same. I promise. As they finally drifted off to sleep, both of them were thinking about the whispered conversation that would come later that morning, the final exchange that would define how they remembered their mountain weekend for the rest of their lives. The final morning arrived too quickly and not soon enough. Marcus woke before Sarah, watching her sleep in the early dawn light that filtered through the cabin windows. There was something peaceful about her face in sleep, a relaxation that he hadn't seen during their waking moments together. Even in the safety of their mountain retreat, she had carried subtle tension in her shoulders, around her eyes, as if she were constantly prepared to defend or explain herself. He thought about what awaited them both in the coming hours. His phone, which he had kept turned off for the entire weekend, would soon explode with messages. Board members would want updates on the quarterly projections. His mother would need details about when he was picking up Zoe. His assistant would have a list of urgent matters requiring his immediate attention. For Sarah, the return would be even more complicated. She would have to look her husband in the eye, knowing that she had made a decision about their marriage. She would have to navigate the careful pretense of their social circle while planning her escape from a life that no longer fit. Sarah stirred beside him, opening her eyes slowly. When she saw him watching her, she smiled, but he could see the sadness already creeping in around the edges. Is it really morning? She asked softly. Unfortunately, yes. Checkout is at 11. Then we have a few more hours. They made coffee together for the last time, moving around the small kitchen with the easy familiarity they had developed over 3 days. It was remarkable, Marcus thought, how quickly they had fallen into rhythms together, how naturally their different styles had complemented each other. I keep thinking about what you said yesterday, Sarah said as they settled on the porch with their coffee. About taking this feeling with me when I go back to my regular life. What about it? I'm wondering if that's really possible. Whether the version of myself that I've been here with you can survive in the real world, or if she'll get buried again under all the expectations and responsibilities. Marcus understood her concern. He had been wondering the same thing about himself. I think it depends on whether we're willing to fight for her, for the person you really are underneath all the roles you play. How do you fight for someone like that? By making choices that honor who you really are instead of who you think you should be. By setting boundaries. By refusing to accept relationships or situations that require you to diminish yourself. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. When I think about talking to David, I get scared. Not of his reaction exactly, but of my own tendency to back down, to smooth things over, to avoid conflict even when conflict is necessary. What would help you stay strong in that conversation? Remembering this. Remembering how it feels to be fully myself with someone who appreciates that person. She looked at Marcus. You've given me a template for what real connection feels like. I can't go back to accepting less than that. They spent the morning packing slowly, neither wanting to acknowledge the finality of their actions. Marcus had originally planned to leave early, to beat the mountain traffic back to Atlanta. But now he found himself delaying, looking for excuses to spend a few more minutes in Sarah's company. "Marcus," Sarah said as they loaded their bags into their respective cars, "can I tell you something that might sound presumptuous?" "Of course. I think you're going to meet someone amazing. Someone who sees all the wonderful things about you that I've discovered this weekend. And when you do, don't let your past experiences make you cautious about opening your heart again." "What makes you so sure?" "Because now that I know what it feels like to truly connect with someone, I can't imagine that kind of magic only happens once in a lifetime. You have too much to offer to spend the rest of your life alone." Marcus felt emotion tighten his throat. "The same goes for you. You deserve someone who celebrates your intelligence, your creativity, your strength. Don't settle for anything less." They stood by their cars, both reluctant to begin the actual process of leaving. The mountain morning was perfect, clear and cool, with the kind of crystalline air that made everything seem possible. "I have something for you," Sarah said suddenly, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small notebook, worn at the edges. "This is where I've been writing down thoughts, observations, pieces of stories for years. I want you to have it." Marcus accepted the notebook, understanding the significance of the gift. This was Sarah's creative soul, the part of herself she had kept hidden from her regular life. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. And maybe someday, when I've written that novel we talked about, you'll remember the woman who started putting words together again during a weekend in the mountains." Marcus opened the notebook to a random page and saw Sarah's handwriting, quick and confident, capturing what looked like the beginning of a character sketch for a story. The writing was vivid and compelling, full of the intelligence and insight he had come to associate with her. "This is beautiful, Sarah. You should be sharing this with the world." "Maybe I will now. Having someone believe in my voice makes me want to use it again." They exchanged contact information, both acknowledging the uncertainty about how or when they might communicate. Sarah was planning to ask David for a separation, but the timing and logistics were still unclear. Marcus wanted to respect her process while maintaining the connection they had built. "I don't want to say goodbye," Sarah said as they stood beside their cars, bags loaded and engines running. "Then let's not say goodbye. Let's say thank you instead. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for 3 days of feeling fully alive. Thank you for giving me courage. Thank you for reminding me who I am beyond my responsibilities. Thank you for showing me what real connection feels like. Thank you for your trust." They hugged then, a long embrace that tried to capture all the tenderness and gratitude and hope they felt for each other. When they finally pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. "Take care of yourself, Marcus. You're an extraordinary man, and I'm grateful our paths crossed. Take care of yourself too, Sarah. Be brave. You deserve everything beautiful this life has to offer." Marcus got into his car first, starting the engine and pulling slowly down the mountain road. In his rearview mirror, he could see Sarah standing beside her car, watching him leave. The image stayed with him as he navigated the winding roads leading back to the highway, back to his real life. The drive to Atlanta gave him time to process the weekend, to think about the conversations and connections and revelations that had unfolded in the space of 3 days. By the time he reached the city limits, he felt different, more settled in his own skin, more clear about what he wanted from his life going forward. His first stop was his mother's house to pick up Zoe. The 8-year-old launched herself into his arms with typical enthusiasm, chattering about her weekend adventures with Grandma. "Daddy, you look different," Zoe said as they drove home. "More relaxed or something?" "I feel more relaxed, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups need quiet time to remember what's important." "What did you remember?" Marcus glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. This amazing little person who had made him a father and taught him more about love than he had ever thought possible. "I remembered that taking care of myself is part of taking care of you. And I remembered that it's okay to want things for myself, not just for our family or the business." "What kind of things?" "Friendship, fun, maybe someone special to share our lives with eventually." Zoe considered this seriously. "I think that would be nice, Daddy, as long as she likes marine biology." Marcus laughed, remembering what Zoe had said about wanting to study and cook fish. "I'll make sure to mention that when I meet her." That evening, after Zoe was in bed, Marcus sat in his home office and opened Sarah's notebook. He read through her observations and story fragments, impressed by her talent and saddened by the fact that she had been hiding this gift for so many years. On an impulse, he picked up his phone and typed a brief text message, made it home safely. Reading your notebook and thinking about how lucky the world will be when you start sharing these stories. Thank you again for an incredible weekend. He hesitated before sending it, aware that Sarah might be in the middle of a difficult conversation with her husband. But ultimately, he wanted her to know that someone believed in her talent and was rooting for her courage. The response came an hour later. Thank you for that. Difficult conversations ahead, but I'm feeling strong. Your friendship means everything. Take care of yourself and that amazing daughter. Marcus smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the weekend and for Sarah's ongoing presence in his life, even from a distance. Whatever happened next for both of them, they had given each other gifts that would last. The reminder that real connection was possible, the courage to demand more from life, and the knowledge that they deserved to be seen and appreciated for who they really were. He thought about his upcoming week, the meetings and decisions and responsibilities that awaited him, but now he approached them with a different perspective, as someone who had remembered that success without fulfillment was just another kind of failure. He would make changes, create better balance, and remain open to the possibility of finding love again with someone who could see him the way Sarah had. As he prepared for bed, Marcus felt genuinely excited about his future for the first time in months. The mountain weekend was over, but its impact was just beginning. Sarah had helped him remember who he was, and now he was ready to live as that person in the real world, whatever challenges that might bring. The notebook sat on his nightstand, a reminder that taking risks on connection and vulnerability could lead to extraordinary gifts, and somewhere, 3 hours away, Sarah was hopefully having her own conversation about courage and change, carrying the strength they had built together into the next chapter of her life. The weekend in the mountains was ending, but the real story was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the mountain weekend, and both Marcus and Sarah had kept their promises to stay in touch. Their communication had been careful at first, limited to encouraging texts about the changes they were each making in their lives. But gradually, as Sarah navigated her separation and Marcus restructured his role at the company, their messages had grown longer and more personal. Sarah had indeed asked David for a separation, a conversation that had gone better than expected. He had admitted to feeling the distance between them and agreed they both deserved to find happiness, whether together or apart. She had moved into a small apartment near her school and, for the first time in decades, was living alone and loving it. Marcus had hired a chief operating officer, a brilliant woman who had immediately taken over the day-to-day management that had been consuming his time and energy. The transition had allowed him to focus on the strategic vision for the company, while maintaining better boundaries around his personal time with Zoe. They had spoken on the phone several times, conversations that stretched late into the evening and left both of them feeling energized and understood. But they hadn't seen each other since leaving the mountain cabins, both agreeing that they needed to focus on their individual transitions before exploring what their connection might become in the real world. Then, on a Friday evening in late spring, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from Sarah. "I have something to tell you," she said without preamble, her voice containing an excitement he hadn't heard before. "Something I should have told you months ago, but I was scared." "What is it?" Marcus asked, settling into his home office chair and giving her his complete attention. "Remember that last morning at the cabin when we were saying goodbye by our cars?"
Of course. There was something I whispered to you just before we hugged.
"Something I've been thinking about ever since, wondering if you heard me, if you understood what I was really saying." Marcus thought back to that emotional goodbye, trying to remember. The morning had been a blur of sadness and gratitude, both of them struggling with the reality of returning to their separate lives. "I remember you whispering something, but I couldn't make out the words. The emotions of the moment were so overwhelming."
Sarah took a deep breath. I said, "I think I'm falling in love with you."
And then, because I was terrified of your reaction, I immediately hugged you so I wouldn't have to see your face. Marcus felt his heart stop. In all their months of communication, through all the support they had given each other during their major life changes, this was the first time either had acknowledged the deeper feelings that had been building since their mountain weekend. "Sarah," he said softly, "I heard something, but I wasn't sure. I thought maybe I was projecting what I wanted to hear." "So you didn't hear it clearly?" "Not the words, but I felt it. In the way you held me, in the tears in your eyes. I felt something that went beyond friendship or gratitude." Marcus paused, and if I'm being completely honest, I was falling in love with you too. There was silence on both ends of the phone, both of them processing this revelation that changed everything about their months of careful communication. "Why are you telling me this now?" Marcus asked gently. Because I've spent the last 3 months being brave in every other area of my life. I left my marriage, I started writing again. I applied for a summer writing fellowship in Colorado. I've been taking all these risks, except the biggest one being honest with you about what I feel. What changed? I got the fellowship. I'll be in Aspen for 6 weeks, starting next month, working on my novel. And I realized that I don't want to go without knowing whether what we started in the mountains could become something real in the regular world. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with practical concerns. What are you asking exactly? I'm asking if you'd be willing to meet me in person again, not in some magical mountain retreat where reality is suspended, but in the real world where we both have actual lives and responsibilities. I want to see if what we felt for each other can survive in daylight. Where? How? I've been thinking about this for weeks. What if you and Zoe came to visit me in Aspen during the fellowship? It would give us a chance to spend time together naturally, and Zoe could experience the mountains. No pressure, just seeing what's possible. Marcus's mind immediately began calculating logistics. Summer was always busy at the company, but with his new COO handling operations, he could probably manage a week away. Zoe would love the adventure, and she had been asking when she might meet the lady friend that Marcus had mentioned in passing. You realize this changes everything, he said. Once we see each other again, once we try to build something real, there's no going back to being just supportive friends. I know. That's exactly why I'm scared and why I had to ask. I can't keep wondering what if for the rest of my life. Marcus thought about the notebook Sarah had given him, which he had been keeping on his bedside table as a reminder of their connection. He thought about the version of himself he had discovered during their mountain weekend, the man who was willing to be vulnerable and open to unexpected possibilities. When would this happen? July, the 4th week of the fellowship. I'd be halfway through the program, settled into a routine, but not yet in the crazy final push to finish my project. And you're sure about this? About wanting to explore something serious between us? Sarah's voice grew stronger, more certain. Marcus, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you for 3 months. Not in an obsessive way, but in the way you can't stop thinking about someone who showed you what your life could feel like if you were brave enough to claim it. Every good thing that's happened to me since the mountain weekend has happened because you helped me remember who I really am. Marcus felt emotion rising in his chest. The same is true for me. You changed my entire perspective on what I want from life, what I'm willing to accept from relationships, what I deserve as a person beyond my roles as father and CEO. So is that a yes? You'll come to Aspen? Marcus closed his eyes, thinking about the risks and possibilities. Dating was complicated enough when you were a single father. Dating someone who lived in another state, someone you had met under unusual circumstances, someone whose own life was in transition, that was exponentially more complicated. But the alternative was continuing to wonder what might have been, continuing to measure every other connection against the standard Sarah had set during their mountain weekend.
Yes, he said simply.
We'll come to Aspen. But Sarah, I need you to know something. What? If we do this, if we try to build something real, I'm going to want all of it. Not a long-distance romance or a casual friendship with benefits. I'm talking about exploring whether we could build a real life together, with all the messiness and complications that would involve.
That's exactly what I want too, Sarah said, her voice bright with relief and excitement.
I didn't go through a divorce and completely restructure my life just to play it safe in my relationships. They spent the next hour planning the logistics of the visit, but more importantly, they talked honestly about their expectations and fears. Both acknowledged that they were taking a significant risk, but both agreed that the potential reward made it worth it. Can I ask you something? Marcus said as their conversation began to wind down. Always. What made you finally decide to tell me about what you whispered that morning? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Last week I was writing in my journal about the fellowship, about how excited I am to focus on my novel for 6 weeks. And I realized that the story I most want to tell is about a woman who learns to be brave enough to ask for what she really wants instead of accepting what feels safe. Then I thought about you, about us, and I realized I was being a hypocrite. How could I write about courage if I wasn't willing to be courageous in my own life? And now I'm terrified and exhilarated and hopeful all at once. But mostly, I'm grateful that you're willing to take this risk with me. Sarah?
Yes. I've been falling in love with you through every phone call, every text message, every story you've shared about rebuilding your life.
What started in the mountains never stopped growing. It just went underground for a while. So we're really doing this? We're really doing this. After they hung up, Marcus sat in his office for a long time, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. In 6 weeks, he and Zoe would travel to Colorado to explore whether a weekend connection could become a lifetime partnership. The practical challenges were significant, but for the first time in years, Marcus felt willing to prioritize his personal happiness alongside his responsibilities. He thought about Zoe, about how he would explain this development to her. She was mature for her age and had been asking when he might start dating again. But introducing her to someone he was serious about was a big step, one that required careful consideration. Most of all, he thought about Sarah and the courage it had taken for her to make that phone call, to risk their comfortable friendship for the possibility of something deeper. She had been rebuilding her entire life over the past 3 months, and now she was asking him to be part of that new foundation. The whispered confession that had been lost in the emotion of their mountain goodbye was finally being heard, and it was changing everything, just as Sarah had always known it would. Marcus picked up his phone and sent a simple text. "Thank you for being brave enough to say what we were both feeling. I can't wait to see what we build together." The response came immediately. "Thank you for hearing me, finally. July can't come fast enough." As Marcus prepared for bed that night, he felt the same sense of anticipation and possibility that had filled him during their mountain weekend. Tomorrow, he would start planning a trip to Colorado that could change the trajectory of his life. He would have conversations with Zoe about family and love and taking risks for the people who matter most. But tonight, he simply felt grateful. Grateful for the courage to go to the mountains alone 3 months ago. Grateful for the random cabin assignment that had put him next to Sarah. Grateful for her willingness to whisper her truth even when she was afraid of the consequences. And most of all, grateful that sometimes, when you're brave enough to be fully yourself with another person, they're brave enough to be fully themselves with you in return. Everything that was about to unfold between them had started with that simple, revolutionary act of mutual recognition. The whispered words that had shocked them both were finally being spoken aloud, and their real story was just beginning.